Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to go over something that will hopefully really help you in the upcoming mocks in January, and that is how to answer different length of questions, different marks of questions. So I'm going to run through these with you. It's quite straightforward. You just have to remember this when you're answering the questions. Quite often in geography anyway, as long as you use in your answer points that are fairly valid, then you're going to get the marks. Okay, you just have to make sure that you're giving the examiner what they're looking for. So we're going to start off with the shorter answers, which are 2 and 4 marks generally, but there are a few 3 marks. So some of them can be source based, some of them can have a graph, some of them can have a resource, etc. And you must use that resource. So sometimes you'll have to do a calculation, but you'll know what to do and you get the marks for that. Sometimes you've got to read off a graph and that kind of thing. So they're more skills based questions, I suppose, and I'll look at those in a separate video. But generally what I'm looking at here is most of the questions on the exam that are not based on a source, apart from when we get down to the 8 markers. So 2 and 4 markers, really all of these, if it's 5 marks or under, it's always what the examiner calls point marked. Okay, so for each point that you make, you get a mark, and for each development of that point, you get a mark. Now, sometimes it will say, give 2 reasons, or give 2 points, or give 1 point, or whatever. So you have to follow what the examiner is asking you to do. But overall, if you've got to explain, which a lot of these questions will be, or describe sometimes, but a lot of the times explain, then you need to make sure that if you've got a 4-mark question, you've maybe given 2 points and explained the significance of those 2 points. You've developed your answer. If you get a 2 marker, you'll either give 2 points or you could give 1 point with a detailed explanation. So it depends what the question is asking. So do really read the question to see, because that'll give you a point of what the examiner wants. But if it's an overall question, it doesn't ask you to give 2 points for 4 marks, then give 2 points and explain those points. Now also, a 2 marker generally has a space of 4 lines. So you're looking to fill most of that, unless your handwriting's really, really tiny. You're not going to get 2 or 4 marks by writing 1 or 2 words. It's just not going to happen. And the same with the 4 markers, you're often given 8 lines. So again, try to fill that as much as you can. There's often big margins in the exam booklet. So it's not as much writing as you might find with normal lined paper. It's not going to be that much. But try to assess whether you've written enough, if that makes sense. So a 2 marker will be 2 points, or 1 point with a detailed explanation or development, and a 4 marker will be 2 points with development of each of those points. Now sometimes there's a 3 marker, and like I said before, unless it specifies what it wants, you give 1 or 2 points, but you give a lot of detail for each of those points or one of those points. And again, it's point marks. So even if you give 1 point, you give detailed development of that point with 2 developments, with and then this happens and then that happens and this leads to, then you will get the 3 points for that, because that's what the examiner's looking for. So make sure you stick with that format for your shorter answers. Now, also, no specific case study details are needed for the shorter answers. The examiner will be looking for general information. If you want to put a bit of a case study in there because it makes it easier for you to explain your answer, you can, but you don't need to. Right, the 8 markers. Now, the 8 markers in paper 1 and 2 that you're going to sit in January will have evaluate and assess. Now, I think evaluate and assess, if I'm quite honest with you, they're very, very similar. And sometimes even when I read definitions in the textbook, they seem like they want the same thing, but they're just ever so slightly different. And I would probably say go more towards evaluating, because you're not going to lose marks. So when it comes to the end, do a little summary paragraph, very, very short one to weigh up which is the most or least important point. So let's have a look at these. So for 8 marks, you'll need 2 to 3 advantages and disadvantages. Now, for a very good answer, I would suggest 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. Now, you can develop those points as much as you like. So if you find that you've got a disadvantage, but it's only a little one, and you can't think of anything else to say, then maybe stick another point in. So that's why it says 2 to 3 advantages and disadvantages. But if you're quite clear on the topic and you're quite clear about your advantages and disadvantages and you feel you can develop those points, then just stick to 2 and 2. So it says here detailed developments of those points are needed here. Location detail is needed, or support data, depending on whether you're given a source or not, whether you know any information about that case study or not. So sometimes it might be just location data, areas in, I don't know, Mumbai or something like that. Sometimes it could be some facts and figures if it's coastal defences, etc. You might have some facts and figures, etc. of rates of erosion or something like that. And use examples and case studies where possible here. The examiner will be looking for you to know where you're talking about. So if possible, you know, think of a case study that will be relevant to that. Now, evaluate and assess means basically these things mean why are some points more important than others, essentially. So when you've got an assess question, that's weigh up the pros and cons. And evaluate one, you'll have to say like which point is the most or least important. Maybe in coastal defences, which type of defence is better, or if you're looking at in Mumbai, which strategies for a sustainable city, which is the most important strategy. But I would say good practice, even with an assess question, is to perhaps add an evaluative comment at the end, because you're not going to lose any marks. Now, in paper 2 in particular, in the UK geographical issues, both the physical and the human, you will get a source with some of these 8 markers, and you must use the source. So in paper 1, you tend not to be given a source. You're just asked an assess or an evaluate question on cities or sustainability or whatever it is, tectonics or hurricanes and things like that. But in paper 2, you may well be given a source with this was usually a map of the UK with some kind of information on either physical geography or human geography. So you must make sure that you use that source, because the mark scheme will be based on your answer having information from that source in it. So it will often say analyse the data. So you can write all over that paper. You can pick out highs and lows. You can pick out areas of the UK that you've got information for. Maybe it's a population question, which areas have got high population, which have got low. You can start writing some development of some of those points about why you think it is, because that's probably what the question's going to ask. If it's physical geography, it could be about rock type, or it could be about land use, or it could be about areas that are prone to flooding, etc. across the UK. So start analysing and annotating that source, because it's really, really important that you do that. So if it's source based, you must use the resource, and that is in paper 2. Okay, so just to summarise, questions that are between 1 and 5 will be point marked. So every point or development of the point, you will get a mark. So be sensible and develop your point. Even if you're thinking, I'm not quite sure this is right, use it anyway. You're probably going to get the mark. And 8 markers, you need 2 to 3 advantages, 2 to 3 disadvantages, and you're going to weigh up which of those are more or least important. And in paper 2, make sure that you use the source. So hopefully that will give you some technique for answering any of the questions that are going to come up in paper 1 or paper 2 in your mock in January. So good luck, and make sure that you like and subscribe.